This is Bloomberg Businessweek with Massar and Tim Stenovec on Bloomberg Radio.
Well, here on Bloomberg Businessweek, we talk a lot about feeding the world and what that takes, and how so many different people from all over are trying to tackle the problem of food insecurity, from plant-based meats and proteins to increasing the sustainability and efficiency of crops. One person trying to do that is Elmar Mair, the co-founder and CEO of Neatleaf. It's a company that says it's using robotics and AI to transform farming. Elmar Mair joins us on Zoom from Santa Cruz, California. It's good to have you on Bloomberg Businessweek. Elmar, explain what exactly Neatleaf is, because when I hear platform, I think of software. I think of something that can be, that's like virtual, that's moved from place to place. How do you apply that to farming?
Yeah, thank you for having me. So what we basically do is we basically are an extensive data collection tool for cultivators. One thing which we have realized is that cultivation is far from optimal. There's like 10, 15, even 20% crop loss every cycle, depending on the crop. But it really is something which is not optimized. And it's basically lack of data collection. So at Neatleaf, we came up with a system. It's called the Neatleaf Spider, which is a cable-based system like a football stadium camera, which operates in between the canopy and any ceiling infrastructure in greenhouses and other indoor facilities, and collects a lot of data. It collects camera images, it collects temperature, humidity, CO2, plant height, leaf temperature, which is key for cultivators, and provides a comprehensive picture of what's going on, while feeding an AI which picks up on plant stress and identifies issues as the system is moving around transparently for the cultivator.
I'm curious specifically for cannabis cultivation, how exactly does the platform help cannabis farming?
Right. So it's a crop agnostic system. So we are currently starting with cannabis, but we're also talking to leafy greens, ornamentals, nurseries, and any other crop which is cultivated indoors in CEA controlled environment agriculture facilities. So for cannabis, we basically capture all these environmental factors throughout this environment to provide a consistent understanding of the microclimates, how the environment changes throughout the day, throughout the night, throughout the full growth cycle. But then we also pick up on plant stress. We detect yellowing, necrosis, leaf folding, and quantify that. So the cultivator gets the plant stress in numbers. It knows I have 5% more yellowing today. I have 10% less folding, and it knows whether the changes they make, like nutrients changes, like irrigation changes, spray applications, had a positive or negative impact. We also measure the actual crop itself, like the buds for cannabis. We detect the sizes, we count them, and so you can forecast the yield. You know that whether a certain microclimate resulted in a specific, yield increase, and the other one was suffering, and you get a better understanding what's happening and how to optimize your cultivation, making it more sustainable, making it more efficient.
But we do know that it's not just for cannabis, and I know that you're focused on cannabis right now, but you can apply this to any indoor farming, right?
Oh, totally. It's not limited to cannabis at all. It's crop agnostic, as I said. And the whole idea is really like with any technology development, you start with the highest margin crop first.
And that's cannabis for you?
Pardon me?
And that's cannabis right now.
And that's cannabis. Yeah, cannabis has the highest margins right now. It's like Tesla also started with the Roadster, not with the Model 3. And you develop your technology and you make it more applicable for crops with smaller margins, and it's totally possible. Like this cable-based technology really leans itself to a large application in large cultivation environments, like a large base of crops. And
why can't you do this outdoors? Why is this only for indoor farming right now?
That's a really good question. So as we capture this data, we capture the understanding how to optimize these environments. Now, indoors in controlled environment, agriculture environments, you can control these parameters. You can actually leverage all this knowledge and put it to the best use. However, it's not limited. You can imagine putting 4 poles outside of a vineyard and operate the same system outdoors and capture the same information. You might not be able to change everything, but you are still able to understand the correlations and how to optimize depending on what parameters you can change and whatnot.
How does AI work here? Because this is a huge buzzword of 2023, artificial intelligence. It seems like every business in every industry is saying that they're leveraging AI to increase their scale or increase their efficiency. So can you talk a little bit more exactly about the artificial intelligence aspect?
Oh, totally. Yeah, it's a huge. So cultivation is a huge black box. My background is not cultivation or plant science, but like learning about it space, I got so much respect for cultivators who have to navigate all these different parameters and factors which are correlated. You have to change. If you change one parameter, you have to change all the other parameters as well. And that's really the challenge there. And that's where we have seen that AI and machine learning really outperforms human and captures these correlations, understands them, and knows how to optimize the space to really navigate it. It's probably one of the reasons why we don't see so much adoption in cultivation, is because farmers know if they introduce a change, if they change the way how they cultivate, they have to relearn everything. And it's only that many iterations you can do in a lifetime of a cultivator.
I'm wondering if you can give us some numbers that show how much it increases yield, how much it increases efficiency. If people who use the platform, growers who use the platform, like what are the results that they get?
So we are still trying to capture a solid baseline around like what these numbers are. We have seen runs where we perform 10% better, runs where we perform 20% better, even like one run where we were like 70% better. But like again, I wouldn't say that these are like the numbers as a baseline. These are like single examples and statistically not really like significant to say, but we are still capturing it. It just requires a lot of data for us to come up with a statistically significant number as a baseline for what we can do with the system. What we have been doing has been like calling out issues earlier, like way earlier than a human can basically pick them up. In a regular cultivation environment, a cultivator has to watch 15,000 plants, like depending on the crop again, like in cannabis, like 15,000 plants per person. Obviously, that's not possible. Our system can keep an eye on each plant, basically on each leaf, multiple times a day, like constantly, and basically capture what happens, what are the changes, and pick them up as early as possible before you can potentially even see them. We are using technology which goes beyond the human eye. And that's obviously a huge win. Now, the reason why the baseline is challenging is it's hard to say like what would have happened if we would not have called that out. It's hard we only go down one path in time, and so it's difficult to compare it. But capturing more data, it will allow us to generalize it and create these numbers, which will are statistically significant, to say.
So you co-founded Neatleaf in 2020. What drew you to this space? Indoor farming, because I know that you worked at Lucid Motors, the Moonshot Factory. Why pivot to farming?
That's a really good question. I originally come from the countryside, like the Italian Alps, and I spent my summers on my auntie's farm, so I have like some emotional ties to cultivation. And then I live here now in Santa Cruz for many, many years, and I started talking to cultivators, and everyone kept talking about data-driven cultivation, and that's the new agricultural revolution. We have to change the way how we cultivate. But then when I looked at their greenhouses, I saw these dangling sensors from the ceiling which capture temperature and humidity. And, I spent my whole career in sensor fusion, sensor understanding, machine learning. And I really I know what's possible, but I knew that these single sensors are not going to capture it. It's not going to be able to provide this revolution which everyone kept talking about. And I looked at how cultivators operate in that space, and they go around and they look at each plant. They use the visual cues. They learn the language of the plants, how the plant expresses stress and signals other and pests and issues. And I know that it's also possible with AI and cameras. And that's why I was like, well, we just need a camera which allows us to move around the plant in a way how a cultivator does, so that we can learn models to pick up on this language, on these signals, and automate that process.
It's really, really cool stuff, and we really appreciate you taking the time and joining us this afternoon. That's Elmar Mair joining us on Zoom from Santa Cruz, California, the co-founder and CEO of Neatleaf, the company that uses robotics and AI to help farmers. Hey, when we think about healthy communities, what are we talking about? Are we talking about making sure that people have access to fresh, healthy food and groceries? Maybe that there are parks close by? Are we talking about a community free from gun violence? A community with clean air? Well, these are the types of questions that I imagine our next guest thinks about quite a lot. We're very pleased to have with us Megan Latshaw. She's Associate Scientist in the Department of Environmental Health at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health. She joins us on Zoom from Baltimore this afternoon. The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, it is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. Megan, good to have you on our program this afternoon. Tell us about the work that you do. What makes a community healthy?
Sure. So when we think about healthy communities, you're absolutely right. We think about is the air that we're breathing, is it healthy, or is it making us sick? Is the water that we're drinking, is it full of lead, or is it something that's going to bring us health? And I think those are very traditional environmental health concepts. You know, you think about environmental health and you think about pollution, but it goes way beyond that. You're absolutely right. When I think about a healthy community, I think about a community where the healthy choice is the easy choice. So, for example, do you live in a community where it's easier to walk than it is to drive? And the reason I use that as an example is because walking is good for you. It's healthy. It's physical activity. But when you're walking, you're also not using greenhouse gases and you're not using transportation that might be polluting the air and the water around you. And so you mentioned, also access to healthy food. I also think about healthy communities as somewhere where transit is accessible and sustainable, and where it can get you to places that make you healthier, such as grocery stores or maybe healthcare appointments and things like that.
Megan, do you get any pushback on these initiatives that you're advocating for? It seems like healthy community, that's something that everybody would want.
Yeah, but this is America, Emily,
I'm curious to hear about the opposition that you get.
It is America, and Americans often don't want to be told what to do. We really pride ourselves in being given choices, and we're certainly not trying to take away choices. What I advocate, and I think what everybody in the community would say, is we want to make the healthy choice the easier choice. So, for example, if you think about cafeterias, maybe not getting rid of meat options, but maybe putting really appealing vegetable or vegetarian options up front at the buffet and then leaving the meat options for the end. So we fill up our plates with things that are not only healthier for us, but also for our planet.
I also think about the government's role in these initiatives, and I wonder to what extent you think the government actually needs to play a role, whether that's a local government, like a city council person advocating for bike lanes in a neighborhood, for example, Megan, all the way up to, the federal government thinking about public transit and trains and making huge infrastructure investments. What's the role of a government when it comes to environmental health?
So when you think about, I'm going to start actually from the top and do reverse of what you did. I think about our planet and the future of our planet, because that's kind of important to the future of humanity. And it's great for people to recycle or reuse or reduce their waste impact. But really, if we are going to save the planet and keep it healthy, we really need to make changes at a global scale. So we need to decarbonize economies around the world. So that is, I think, a government scale option. And that's something that was being talked about last week at COP, but then all the way down to, if you think about in the US, if you think about the state level, things that lawmakers can do. Some states, and actually some countries, have amended their state constitution to enact the right to a healthy environment. And that might sound like, oh my gosh, that's really tough to do, but there are examples of where it's been done, and it's not some really long amendments. It's honestly, it's just a few sentences. And I think that, is one small step that state government can make. And I think local government, if you're talking about cities and counties, they make zoning decisions all the time. And so things like, do we expand highways or do we expand public transit? If you're going to be thinking about the healthier thing to do, it's expand public transit.
What are some examples of decisions businesses can take to help the planet?
I think this is a really important point. Say a company is deciding, should we shift away from using fossil fuels? The tendency is to look at the cost and, the cost here and now, and maybe decide it's too expensive. But if a company is thinking about it from a sustainability perspective, and actually, I love the Iroquois have a principle called the seventh generation. And the way that they make decisions is they think, how is this decision going to impact the future 7 generations ahead? And so, this company, if they're thinking about shifting away from using fossil fuels, maybe they need to think about fossil fuels and the impact of the workforce, or how it's going to impact the community where they're located. Maybe flooding means they would have to move their headquarters. And so if we can shift into this longer term decision making, I think the calculus can change.
Do you think the incentives, just in the last 30 seconds we have with you, do you think incentives are properly aligned for that?
Well, absolutely not. I think we need to stop subsidizing fossil fuels, and I think we need to create new incentives to make companies think about these externalities as they're making their decisions.
Yeah, I mean, if it doesn't make sense from a financial perspective, it's tough to see a company actually make that decision. At the end of the day, the companies are certainly responsible to different stakeholders, but it feels like over and over again, at least with publicly traded companies, I feel like shareholders are the ones that hold them most accountable. Really appreciate you taking the time and joining us. Megan Latshaw, Associate Scientist in the Department of Environmental Health at the Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health, joining us on Zoom from Baltimore. The Johns Hopkins Bloomberg School of Public Health that is supported by Michael R. Bloomberg, founder of Bloomberg LP and Bloomberg Philanthropies. This is Bloomberg Businessweek.